everybody. Nice to see you all again, and welcome to Digital Diaries, the adventures of a computerized quilter. I'm Deanne Perigo, and we have with us Gina and Paige and Karen and Christine today. And we're going to be talking about some of our favorite functions or features. And if you want a list of a bunch of them, go to the Gamble website, gamble.com. And if you click on Statler and then scroll down the page a little bit, there is a really long list. And we just picked out a few of those today, and we're going to chat about them. So, how many of you educators have a different set of icons on your tool strip on your laptop or your desktop versus the one on your Statler?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have 5 different tool strips. I like the
my.
ability to change them up for whatever I'm doing.
Right, and you use your laptop for different things usually than the Statler.
I do too. Isn't it great that we get to change them around? So, we each have some different favorites. What is your favorite of today? Paige, you want to go first? What's your favorite?
I have so many favorites, but I think hands down the one I use most frequently is repeat patterns. I know edge to edge will give you a nice, clean, edge to edge layout. I like the repeat patterns because it gives me more flexibility, and I can move into other things. The quilt behind me, there it is.
Oh, I love it.
That was done in repeat pattern, and I just set it up differently. It just gives me a little bit more flexibility. I use it with all of my overall designs. We're running 5 Statlers here. We use repeat pattern on our daily overall designs, and we use fill to make them fit within the boundary of the quilt. So that's a little bit different. I've got a few examples I'd like to show you. In our shop, we do use repeat patterns exclusively for our overall design. And once you know the setup, it's like anything else that you've learned how to do. You just keep doing it over and over again. Let me show you a little bit about what I like about it. I like the versatility. So I'm going to be using this soccer pattern, and I'm going to go into repeat patterns. I like to use rows and repeats. I'm going to put in enough repeats that I'm over the width of my quilt. And then I'll start adding down here, and I know my quilt is 65 inches, and I'm over that as well. So I'm going to go with that. I can alternate, and many times I like to do that. One of the things that I really like to do is to flip every other row horizontally. What this does is it changes my sewing direction and changes the look of the patterns. And then I can move these left or right, up or down, and I can change where those patterns are. I can move my patterns around and determine how I want them. For instance, I may want half a soccer ball here and half a soccer ball there. Because I flipped them back and forth, when I do a fill, these will sew continuously. So this is what I do a lot on our overall designs. We do them in repeat pattern. I'd like to show you a couple other things that we can do with repeat pattern. Here's one of our overall designs in repeat patterns, and because I can take all of the patterns as a whole and move them left and right and up and down, I can set them so that they actually pretty much go where I want them to. It's not an exact science, but you can see around these squares where I've made the patterns fall. I just set it up one time, and every time I advance, I relocated, and they stayed pretty good throughout the quilt. Here's a quilt that we set up in repeat pattern. And the secret to this is basically taking every other row and flipping it horizontally. There is some setup with each row, but I'm not going to go into that detail here, but you can see it curls one way on the top row and it curls a different direction on the bottom row. Here's another really cool thing that you can do. You can flip patterns not only horizontally, but vertically. So when you set them up, you get a different look. Here is the layout of that particular quilt. This was all set up in repeat patterns. Here's the block right here. Here's another example. This is a pattern that has almost a feather motif on one side and an arrow on the other. And we set it up where the feather was in all the white area. Here is that design layout. This is easier to do than you think. There is a little trick to it, and if you want to learn more, there's classes in the Gamble Education. This is so easy to do that we even show our rental people that come in. We do a Charity Sunday once a month. Well, once we get through COVID, we'll be back at it again, I'm hoping. And this quilt was set up by one of the gals that does our rental program and came in to do a charity quilt. So lots of fun, easy to do. Repeat patterns is really one of my favorite, most functional features.
That was awesome.
So Paige, is repeat patterns something that a beginner could use as well?
Oh, absolutely. Up until the coronavirus came through, we did a lot of rentals. And so I had a lot of beginners here, and we show them repeat patterns. You're learning the steps, and as long as you do the steps in the same order, it's not that much different than edge to edge. You still have to do those steps in the right order. That's the one thing about computers. They'll do exactly what you tell them to do. You just have to be careful what the order you put things in. So I don't think it's any harder. I just think it's different, and different's okay.
Difference.
So Paige, is that how you get those perfect little circles?
You know what? That is how I get perfect little circles. Because in repeat patterns, I set the size of the pattern so that an element is exactly the size I want. I might want this leaf to be an inch, or I want my circles to be 3 inches, the biggest one and the smallest one 1 inch. And then because I'm using rows and repeats, I don't have to worry about the distortion that comes around that gives you ovals or eggs. That was an excellent question, Christine.
Are there a lot of different uses for repeat patterns, not just doing from one edge to the next?
Oh, absolutely. I know Christine does it too, but I use it to place blocks or to repeat things over and over. Christine, I know you use again.
I do. So a lot of times I'll actually use repeat patterns to place the pattern on the screen specifically in a perfect place. And then I can actually use again to place another pattern in relation to that first one so that they're spaced exactly how I want them to be.
Oh, there's just so much that we can do with that. I love it. What are some of the other features and functions that y'all like? Karen, what's one of your favorites?
Okay, good. I was hoping you'd ask me next. So I'm like Paige, and I have a ton of favorites. Like I like all the functions of CreativeStudio. But for today, I chose one specific one that's had kind of an update. It's even better in the latest version of CreativeStudio. And I chose this feature because it works for Statler owners and Elevate owners. So any of us can use it. So I chose to highlight Draw Text. Because whether you're an Elevate owner or a Statler owner, you can create patterns that are text, words, and place them on the quilt. So I think that's pretty cool. And like I said, with CreativeStudio 7.2, the draw text is even faster. So it kind of had an upgrade, and I like that. And I'll show you one way that I use it.
The quilt I have here in CreativeStudio is one that my youngest son made when he was in elementary school as a class project. He used the school colors of gold and maroon, and then you can see he placed text, phrases, quotes in the gold bands and then patterns in the maroon bands. He used the Statler to quilt this project, but it also could have been done on the Elevate by creating the patterns in Creative Studio standalone mode and then saving those patterns, syncing to the Elevate tablet, and then stitching out those text patterns. So I mentioned that draw text feature is better than ever in the latest version of Creative Studio. This is Creative Studio 7.2, and the draw text is faster than it used to be. Let me go to a different quilt group and show a little bit closer shot of some of the text on this quilt. And then using draw text, I'll show you an example of how quick the new draw text feature is. In the latest version of Creative Studio, the text isn't placed on screen until you take a pause in typing. So instead of trying to keep up with those really fast typers, it will wait until you pause and then render that text and place it on screen. So there's no flashing, there's no confusion. It just waits patiently while you draw the text, and then it places that text on the screen. So I've just duplicated this last sentence, this last quote, and when I say okay, I can go look at it. I can zoom in. And this is the cursive font in Creative Studio 7.2. And it's just so cool because most of the words will stitch continuously. At least each word, you can see there's only jump stitches between the words, so there are fewer tie-offs, and it stitches faster. And of course, like any text, whether it's block or cursive, these are patterns that can be resized, enlarged, moved. So that can be taken to the quilt and sized for whatever area you want to put it in. For example, what my son did was he drew a boundary that showed just one gold band, and then he was able to place that pattern in that space on the Creative Studio screen and then stitch it out. Cool, right? Okay, I know this is not the only awesome feature in Creative Studio, but it was my pick for today's favorite.
Oh, that was great, Karen. Are there some other ways that we can use it? You know, putting names in a quilt. How else have people used it?
Well,
Gina, how do you use it?
I like to float my quilts that I'm going to use the draw text with, and oftentimes with a child's quilt or memory quilts, I like to, when I get to the bottom, I put the top of the quilt and up and back so that it doesn't get stitched on. And then I will put the name in the bottom right corner of the quilt. I'll reverse it so that it can be readable on the back. And then once I have the name in, I bring the top back over and finish the edge to edge or whatever I'm doing. And it just gives such a beautiful effect. Sometimes I do change the color of thread for that name so that it really stands out in the edge to edge.
Oh, like a label. I like that idea.
A lot of fun.
Yeah. Who else has ways that they use it?
Sometimes I'll actually go and splice it into an edge-to-edge pattern so that you'll have an edge-to-edge loopy pattern and then someone's name in the middle. But I've also been known to actually put words all the way across the whole entire quilt as like an edge-to-edge pattern, like lyrics to a song, but without color. That's a little over the top.
Yes.
I recently did a Facebook Live on using text for a label, but I put layers and layers of stitching on so it looks kind of like embroidery. So I do that frequently.
How nice. Because there's so much that we can do with our statlers that you know, the embroidery side of it is fabulous. We need to talk more about that on another episode, don't we? Okay, so another feature. Christine, what's your favorite today?
Well, I have lots of favorites, but today and most days, my favorite is fill, which granted is probably not as useful on one of the elevates as it is on a Statler, but you can still use it in CreativeStudio and modify patterns to take to your elevate.
Mhm.
And that's actually one of the favorite things that I like about fill, because it permanently modifies the pattern to make it fit a specific shape. It allows me to save off patterns or partial patterns. That's the big power, I think. Not only do I use fill for my backgrounds, but I use fill to create patterns for all of those different areas of the quilt that you may not be able to find a pattern that fits when you're doing all that custom work.
Mhm.
I mean, I also use fill, like Paige said, when you're doing hitting the edge of a quilt, I always use fill so that I get nice clean lines and I don't go too far off into the batting. I use it in a lot of different ways. I can use it not only with the machine head to give me specific spots on that quilt so I get very exact placing, but I can also use it with my mouse and the grid so that I can go and modify patterns in unique and interesting ways.
I know I use fill a lot. It's one of my favorites. How about the rest of you?
Well, I was actually sitting here thinking I need to take some of Christine's classes because I want to see what you're doing with it. I use fill all the time as well, but most of my quilting is edge to edge, and so I'm filling, or overall quilting, and so I'm just trimming edges of quilts. But Christine, I love the idea and the thought that we can be so creative with the fill feature and make patterns for spaces. That's cool.
Well, and I do have quite a few different classes. One is specifically using it with apply in order to create a pattern for a specific shape on a quilt. I also have another one where we use one big pattern on the whole entire quilt and then do individual little fills to get a floating background effect. So I use fill in a lot of unique and interesting ways.
Well, let's see what you're going to do for us today.
So what I want to show you on fill today is a little bit of how I've gotten patterns to fit some of these odd shapes in this quilt. So I'm going to zoom in so that we're going to focus on this arrow shape. And I know there's definitely some arrowhead patterns out there, but you can see not only did I use fill in the background area to get all those straight lines in there, but I also used fill specifically to get this arrowhead shape, specifically from a pattern that was not necessarily arrowhead shaped to start with. So I'm going to come over here to where I actually had this all stitched out, and we're going to focus on this little boundary region in here. So you can see the pattern itself looks a little weird and choppy, but it definitely fills that exact arrowhead shape. I'm going to go ahead and pull down a copy of the pattern that I actually took it from. So this is the pattern that I used for the fill. I'm just going to go ahead and grab a copy of it and come down here. And I can go ahead and rotate this, and I can put it, I'm going to put it close in there. I'm going to come in and let's just get rid of what I actually stitched out so I can kind of show you the works here. And I'm going to make this pattern just a little bit smaller so that it fits into that shape a little bit better. And so I'm going to make sure when I place this pattern that it fits well. And you can see I have an end point here at the point. I can actually go and use my machine head and repeat patterns to precisely place this pattern right where I want it on the quilt. But we're just going to eyeball it with that boundary. And then I can go ahead and use that boundary and go ahead and do my fill inside. And so now I've used just part of that pattern to get a fill that perfectly fits that piece of the piecing.
Wow,
Okay.
that was great. I wish I could see that in the whole class, but that is something
Luckily,
we
we
can
have
find.
some of them available out on Gamel.
Yep. Check out those classes, everybody. But how are some of the ways that the rest of you use Phil? Paige, I'm sure you use it occasionally.
Oh, occasionally. I use it all the time. And I love Christine's thing about making patterns fit. So I'm constantly putting a larger pattern over an area and doing a fill to get just a piece of it. And that's what it fits right there.
Partial patterns are powerful.
Partials. Yeah. I
Mhm.
guess I wasn't thinking of it as a partial, but that's exactly what it is.
It is.
Yeah.
Well,
Fill will make it work.
yeah. Well, let's move on. Gina, what are you sharing with us today? What's your favorite?
Well, I have a lot of favorites too, but one of my big favorites is Apply because it makes my life easier and I can get creative with it. And really the sky is the limit with Apply. You can make new patterns, you can fill in sashings, you can fill in boundaries, you can just do countless things. So it's a very, very versatile feature. And I'm going to show you a quilt that I used it in just recently to fill in the sashings. This week I've been working on a quilt using Apply was perfect for filling in the sashings. I imported a picture of this quilt into CreativeStudio so that I could see how the sashing was going to look. I like to go ahead and start along the piecing and draw the line across. And when I get to about the middle of the vertical sashing, I left click and then I right click to make an ending point or a pause to the drawing, and then I start again. This way it gives my corners a nicer look. Once I get that done, all I have to do is size my circles, highlight my circles, highlight the line, and say apply. And the first thing that you want to do after that is delete the original line. So I'm going to do the next one. Apply the pattern to the line. Delete the line. And then when I am ready and I have done as many as I'm going to do, I can select all and use my nudge feature or my arrow to put them in the right place. And because I drew the line according to the hills and valleys of the piecing, I don't have much adjustment to do at all. The other fun thing is you can hit the select all and you can hit apply and it will do them all. Now the only thing is then you have to go back and delete the lines, so I usually do it one at a time.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And then
So it's more than just doing chunking versus turning your quilt for borders, right?
right.
But it does work for that.
It does work for that as well, exactly. That it's so versatile, and when you have you can make some of your own patterns to use with it. And so I really enjoy doing it because pattern placement becomes so much easier with the apply feature, because you can use it and your pattern will follow the curves of the piecing instead of going straight across. And
That's my favorite part is the curves. I did one quilt that was nothing but circles and circles and curves and applied to it. It works great.
And another thing I'm going to show you is I like to do fun and silly things like take a meander pattern and apply something to it, like little airplanes flying along, and turning that into a new edge to edge. And so that's another fun way to have use apply. But yeah, we all love to do the blanket stitching too, and and that makes a lot of fun, or at least half of us do. So we all have different things that we enjoy for fun.
Thank you, Gina. Okay, so I'm going to go last here. One of my favorites is the Pattern Manager. There is, I don't even know how to describe it. It was life-changing for me because I could actually see pictures of all the patterns. And as a very visual person, I may look at the names sometimes, but I know maybe a particular designer and I know what it looks like because they named it after a person instead of whatever the design is. And so I'm looking through those and I'm looking at the pictures. That's just one of the many, many, many things about Pattern Manager that sticks out with me, but I'll show you a few other things that it can do, and then we'll be right back and talk some more about it. My favorite feature is the Pattern Manager. It does so many things that I'm only going to be able to share a few of them with you. Pattern Manager allows me to easily locate all of my patterns by searching them out from my entire computer and placing them into one pattern library. And it's located right here on the left side of my screen. I'm then able to organize them with as many tags or words that identify the pattern as I need. I can place them into groups called collections by designer or price point or monthly club. I can even place a gold star on the patterns, choosing them as favorites because I may use them often, and allowing them to be shown first in my library. The Pattern Manager also stores the patterns in the Pattern Cloud, and this provides not only a safe and secure backup, it also allows me to access and view them from most any device, whether it has CreativeStudio 7 or not. And as you can see on my screen, Pattern Manager displays the pattern picture as well as its name. This is so helpful for finding those patterns that may be unusually named. I can also use a pattern straight from my pattern library with one of the functions that are on my tool strip, or I can place it into my project along with others and use them at a later time. There are so many things that I love about Pattern Manager. We even have a store right there that we can audition patterns or purchase them and use them. So if you want to learn more about the Pattern Manager, check out the 2019 Quilting with Confidence Tour. It's recorded and available for purchase on the Gamble website, gamble.com. And there you'll find an entire 90-minute class just for Pattern Manager feature. So I hope you really get to know it well and use it. It is such a life changer. Thank you. So what are some of the things that the rest of you like about Pattern Manager? Because there's so much to do. We can have, I don't know, an entire class on the tour about it. So what other things?
I think we did.
Oh.
I think you were right. It changed your life because I had all these patterns that I had made. I'm one that I'm constantly making a new pattern for each quilt for custom sections. And I didn't know I had those. They were just lost out there in oblivion. And once I started bringing everything in, it was amazing. And now we have the new feature about finding patterns with no tags. So you're going to see all kinds of stuff you didn't even know you had. It's like grabbing an old purse out of the closet and you have $5 now.
Well, and before you used to have to know where your pattern was on your computer. Now it's always there, and you can search, like Deanne said, by picture of the pattern instead of by remembering where it lives. I think that's a huge thing too.
And that's my biggest thing too, is because the organization side of things is so important to me because I wasn't that organized before. And now I bring a pattern into Creative Studio one time and it's always there for me. And
You
it's
don't have
there
to
for
buy
me
it
on all of
again?
my different computers too, because I can just sync it and I know I have a backup. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
How
The more
many?
patterns we get, the more important it becomes.
yeah.
during the pandemic, it's been really helpful because boxes are coming to me in the mail instead of customers. And so I'm able to send them an email with little pictures of patterns because of Creative Studio. And that has been so helpful during this pandemic.
So how many of you used to buy patterns more than once because you didn't know you still had it?
Oh,
So it saves us a lot of money, doesn't it?
Well, I like the fact that the pattern cloud, if you try and buy something, it will tell you you already have it.
yep.
Mhm. Well, and talking about the pattern cloud, it gives us access to our patterns even if we're not in Creative Studio. So we can look at it on our phone, we can look at it on our iPad, we can look at it wherever.
On a
Yes.
phone. In the days when we used to be able to go and have lunch with a customer, I would easily be able to pull up all of my patterns without even having my laptop with me. It's great.
Mhm. That there's just so much to the pattern cloud that we could talk about, but we are running out of time. So until next time, see you later, everybody.
Bye.
Everybody.
Bye.